Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Hi-Fi Preschool and Kids Weekly Training Podcast. We are so excited that you are joining us today, and joining me today, we have the one and only Jeremy Carroll.
That's quite an introduction. Thank you, Isaac. Glad to be here.
And also the one and only Kayla Stevens.
Yeah, I'm only one and only now because Jeremy's here.
So we have a fun group here together as we jump into this brand new truth that we are going to be learning in the month of June. I am uniquely designed, and for preschoolers, God made me special. And this is going to be a really, really fun theme, a really, really fun truth that we get to talk to kids about, whether that they've been to church for this is their first time, or they've been to church since they were born. This is a truth that can really pertain to every single one of these kids that steps into your church. But you know, if you've listened to the podcast, that we love to always start with a fun connection question, get to know each other a little bit more first. So, Jeremy, Kayla, I have a question for each of you. What is something that you've made? Because our theme for kids is remarkable. You have to say it like that. Remarkable, because there's the word marker in it, and it's an art theme. So remarkable, what is something you've made that you're really proud of?
I almost bailed out of this question when you asked me to be on here. I'm like, there's no one worse to talk about crafty things than me. I am just, that's not the right thing. But when I think about things that I've made that I've really been proud of, I really go to back in the previous iteration of my life when I was, before I came to Lifeway, I was on church staff. And about the most creative space I've been in is when I have done like video creation, video production. And so I think back to my days at a church in Texas where I created a character who was kind of a man in black kind of thing. This was way back. This was VBS 2014 Agency D3. And so I created this kind of man in black character that was sort of our go-to guy for all the announcements, and actually made a live appearance at our family night. But just the art of creating this character, creating the videos, which I did on green screen. I did a whole lot of new things for me creatively on that. And so that's not exactly on point with markers, but it's something I created that I really kind of created from scratch to fit in this world of this theme for VBS.
Very nice. Well, you can't sell yourself short on being creative and creating cool things. All right, Kayla, what is something that you have created that you are really proud of?
Well, I can resonate with Jeremy, and probably listeners, a lot of you guys can resonate of just like, I don't feel like, I'm a really crafty person all the time. A lot of times the kind of craft projects I do, I feel like turn out looking like a second grader did them versus an actually a second grader doing them. But I guess a few years ago, I invested in one of those little cutting machines. You guys know the ones. And it was I remember the first project I did with that. And I remember feeling like, it doesn't look like macaroni on like construction paper. Like, I'm so proud of myself. And so, nothing super deep, but I remember just like, I just felt really good in that moment. I'm not super crafty. I like the idea of doing craft things, but I typically shy away from them because the perfectionist in me wants them to be perfect and wonderful. And the process of making something, I often get frustrated in. And so, anyway, that was just the first thing that came to mind. That's something that I was like, it actually looks like a real thing and not just something that, a second grader did. So
that is awesome. And if you are a crafty person, they're great. Like I love crafts, and I made a t-shirt last night because I could. And I was like, this sounds like a fun thing to do in 10:30 at night. Just cut out some vinyl and put it on a t-shirt. So very cool. Well,
this is where we are different.
Well, there are lots of different creative ways, and we're really excited to be able to not only celebrate the individual kids and preschoolers' creativity, but how each of them have been uniquely designed by their creator, by God. So, Kayla, would you mind just doing a little bit of an overview of what these kids and preschoolers will be learning each week at Hi-Fi?
Yeah, so this month in June, we're talking about how I am uniquely designed, or in the preschool space, we are talking about how God made me special, right? Same concept, but different language that we want to put around it for the preschooler or for the kid in the room. So kids are learning about remarkable, I am uniquely designed, and preschoolers are learning one of a kind, God made me special. And this truth, if you guys are tracking with us in our 12 truths, you'll know in just a couple of months in August, we're going to be talking about another truth that is really similar and kind of different at the same time. So this one is I am uniquely designed. In a couple of months, we're going to be talking about I am designed for a purpose. And so the difference between these two truths is this one is really talking about the unique design that God has put on every person. So this month we're talking about God made me on purpose. God made me with value. God made me in his image, and God made me for relationship. These four main ideas are things that are true of every person. God made all of us on purpose. He made all of us with value. He made all of us in his image, and he made us for relationship. And when we get over into truth 12, the kid language around that truth is that I am designed for a purpose. The preschool language is God has a plan for me. So that truth is more specific, leaning into talking about the plan that God has for us to follow God and to speak up and share about Jesus, of loving others and growing in my faith. So that is more specific to those who are in faith, right? That God's purpose and plan for them in their lives is to honor and glorify and obey and follow God, right? This truth is more widespread for everyone, whether you're teaching kids that are in pre faith or kids who have already trusted in Jesus. They are all made for purpose and with value and made in his image and made for relationship. And so this month, that's what we're going to be leaning into, is those different things about how God made us special. You know, I love this this little paragraph in Flip the Script in talking about this truth specifically. It says, voices in culture may tell our kids that they are random, a product of chance, or even a mistake. But God says differently. God says they are unique, wonderful, special creations because they are designed by
Hmm.
him. He made all people who they are and how they are. God does not make mistakes. He makes masterpieces. You are designed by God. So that's what we're going to be leaning into this month, of talking about how we are designed, uniquely designed by God and for God.
I love that word, masterpieces. Like, as the kids discovered that they were made on purpose, with value, in God's image, for relationship, that they are masterpieces. They are uniquely designed. And in a lot of ways, Psalm 139 has really been a team favorite verse for the hi-fi team. We've put it in a few places. It was a verse in one of our early truths, and it's actually part of the theme verse for this month. So we're going to be looking at Psalm 139, 14a. I will praise you because I have been remarkably and wondrously made. So, Jeremy, I want you to, would you mind talking about that just for a second? Of why is this passage so foundational, so important when it comes to kids and their identity?
Yeah, I think you're right. This has been one of the earliest passages as we conceived about what hi-fi was going to be 2+ years ago. One of the places we kept going, as we kept coming back to these I am statements, we kept going back to Psalm 139. And I think it's because, particularly in our culture, we know that hi-fi is a culturally aware resource. And particularly in our culture, um, there was a generation in the past um, where I think that kids were generally spoken of you matter, like I wouldn't say they were elevated, but they were, you matter. There's value to you as a child. And we've had kind of some of that cultural protection around kids. And today that's just shifted so much that I think there are a lot of kids, preschoolers, students in our churches that don't understand that when we address this idea of God has spoken, the question of who am I, God has spoken to that. Psalm 139 doesn't pull any punches. It goes straight to the heart of the matter. Verse 1, Lord, you've searched me and known me. It talks about how all the ways we know, whether you sit down sit down or stand up. It says you have encircled me. You've protected me. You've come around me. And then when we get into these verses, the for this particular truth, 14 and 15, but even 13, right above that says, for it was you who created my inward parts, and you knit me together in my mother's womb. Our response to understanding that God has made each of us, he's made us each in his image, to have value, yes, to have purpose, and we'll talk about that again at a different truth, but to have just, you matter. And I wonder, some of the kids that we serve, how long has it been since they've heard, you matter? You matter to me as an adult leader. You matter to God, your creator. You matter. And when we hear that, our response should be where our verses are. I praise you, God. God, I praise you because you have carefully, specially, remarkably, right? We got to say the
Thank
remarkably.
you. Yes,
Remarkably
thank you,
made. Yeah, I got to get in there. So it said, you have made me. And then it goes on to praise, God, I know this full well. I know this very well. God, I can trust you. And I just think that there's something in Psalm 139, a message for kids and students and preschoolers that is so core to this idea of identity that it really is. When we talk about the intrinsic value of humankind, Psalm 139 goes straight to the heart of it. God cares about us. He knows us deeply. He cares, and he made us, and he wants us to know that. And I think that message of he made us and he wants us to know that we're cared about and cared for is such a part of what Hi-Fi is all about. All of our 12 truths are really about this. And I think that's why it's so inseparably pulled, and why we go back to it time and time again, because it's so core to the Hi-Fi brand, but that message that the Hi-Fi stands for.
For sure. I'm excited. I get to teach this every Sunday, and I love that I get to stand up on the stage and I get to tell these kids, hey, you are uniquely designed. You were made not on accident, but God made you on purpose. So this week, as we even more unpacked, yes, it is our theme verse of Psalm 139, but this week specifically, we are looking at the passage of Psalm 139 to really unpack that, to really show kids and preschoolers that they are not an accident, that they are not here just on a whim, but they were made on purpose. And this is a message, we've said this is a message that can be for any kid, the kid who has never been to church before, the kid who maybe it's the pastor's kid, or the kid who is there every time the doors are open. This is an important message for all of them. So kind of question for the group is, how can we talk about this truth of being remarkably made with kids and preschoolers who are at different places on that spiritual pathway? And if you're not familiar with the spiritual pathway, one really cool thing about Hi-Fi, really quick, I'm going to step back, but one really cool thing about Hi-Fi is that we never want to assume that a kid has heard anything about scripture. We never want to assume that kids are coming to church ready to hear the word H-E-A-R, but we are just kind of going to assume that they are here, H-E-R-E, and that we have an opportunity to build a relationship with them and share with them the good news of Jesus. So with this spiritual pathway, it goes through steps of, hey, I'm just hearing the gospel for the first time. Hey, I'm starting to have conversations and ask questions. Hey, I'm making that decision, all the way to, hey, I am teaching the gospel. That's a very quick overview of our spiritual pathway. But from the beginning, from them just first hearing all the way to they are ready to teach it to others, we know that there's a broad scope between those two. So we are really excited for this particular truth because we feel like it connects to all of those kids. So I'm going to re-ask the question now that I've gone back and explained the spiritual pathway a little bit. How do you feel like we can talk about this truth with kids who are at different places along that pathway?
Yeah, this is a great question. And honestly, it's a question that we really want to ask every single month and every single week, right? Because just like you said, Isaac, we don't assume where kids are at. We don't assume that they have trusted in Jesus yet. We don't assume what kind of like experience they have outside of church. And so as we teach and as we lead and build relationships with those kids and get to know them more, it's important for us to really be thinking and considering where every kid is at on that spiritual pathway, and that wherever they are, Hi-Fi is going to teach them something about who God is and who they are and how they can be transformed by God if they are already in that believing and growing and reaching stage, that faith stage, as they're growing in their faith and reaching back and reaching out and bringing their friends in. There are elements that are influencing and encouraging and guiding those kids as well. And so that's one of the special things that I love about this resource, is that it really meets kids on every side of the spectrum. With this truth and with this week in particular, and teaching about how we are remarkably made, I love this Psalm 139 of, it's the heart of David as he's talking and praying to God, and that relationship that you see that he has with him, that, God, you made me remarkable. You made me this way. I will praise you because of who you are. And I think in this particular session and in this particular month, it's really helpful as we think about every one of these things is something that is true of all people. That we are made by God, that we are made to be in relationship, that we are made in God's image, that He made us with value and He made us on purpose. And so, as we lean into this week and as we kind of jump into this new month of content, I think it's really helpful as we're thinking through about how God made all of us, every person, on purpose and for a purpose. And He wants us to live into that as we learn and follow Jesus.
Kayla, that's so true.
Well, I was gonna kind of piggyback on that, because I think because so many kids haven't heard this in a while, this message of God made you on purpose. Like, you're not an accident. You are, in fact, a masterpiece. You are, in fact, God's creation. I think there are lots of people in that front part of the pathway that need to hear that. But there's also those people, those kids who've grown up in our church. They're there every single week. God made you in the way that you are. God cares about who you are, and He made you for a purpose. And I think that's in particular, just to again piggyback off what Caleb said, and to expand what I was saying earlier about just the passage of Psalm 139. That's the heart of it, is whether you've been in church for years and years and years, or whether this is your very first time. This is a truth and a message that everybody needs to hear, including your leaders, by the way.
I'm so glad you said that, Jeremy, because I was going to talk a little bit about that leaders even need to hear this. So even those people that are serving in your church, they need to be reminded that they are made, that they were made on purpose, that they were created by God, that they matter. And I'm so excited to be able to share that with preschoolers, kids, and with the leaders this week at Hi-Fi. Now, with this truth, we live in a world that is broken, right? That is something that we kind of talk about a lot in Hi-Fi, that we live in a broken world. And because of that, there are always some challenges that come with teaching these truths, because the world takes truth and they distort it. So Jeremy, would you mind just taking a second and just what challenges might come with this truth, with this session, talking about how we were made on purpose?
Yeah. So some of our truths are like this one, which are kind of broad strokes applies to everyone. God made every person, every human in his image and on purpose and with value. There are some of our truths that are specific to those who are Christians, and so we, when we get to I am made for a purpose, designed for a purpose, like we get to that one, like we're going to talk some about some uniquenesses about the Christian life, but in this one in particular, as we're kind of talking about this broad stroke, I think that we just need to, leaders, we all need to be aware. And I teach this in my church. And so I'm with you on this one. We all need to be aware that anytime we bring up biblical truth, that some of our kids, many of them perhaps, they're maybe kids more so than preschoolers, but they may be bringing in, or using a cultural worldview as a filter. And so when they hear things like you're made on purpose, you're made for with value, in other words, you're made as a masterpiece. When they hear that, and while we believe that that's biblically true, that we have foundational scripture that helps us understand that, there can be a potential trap where kids may hear things that the culture is saying. They may interpret this in your truth, and you do you. God made you completely. Not only did he make you on purpose, but perfectly on purpose. And that's not exactly what scripture says, because like you said, Isaac, we live in a broken and fallen world. We all carry this weight of sin and brokenness that we talk about through the three circles. And so we just need to, I think it'll be helpful for us just to be aware that we're not saying that every child is perfect exactly the way they are. What we're saying is that God made us with purpose, with value, and that he invites us as we are. But then we're challenged with the holiness of God to conform to the image of his son, the way scripture tells us. We're challenged to not stay the way we are, but to come as we are. And there, back in the 90s, there was that song, "Come Just As You Are," and it was a beautiful song. But sometimes we think about Jesus, that's kind of half the statement. Come just as you are, but you don't leave the way you came. Like you leave differently when we go out into the world. And so I just think it's helpful for us to realize we're not affirming all of the things that are out in the world, including gender identity and all of those hot button topics. We're not saying God built that in you, and so you're exactly how you need to be because God made you that way. What we're saying is God created, he knit you together, he put you together. There may still be some things in us that are imperfect, and likely, and in fact there are, because we know that we live in a broken and fallen world. And so I just think going into it as leaders, we don't have to always unpack every one of those every single week, but we just need, I think it'd be helpful for us leaders to know that that's a mindset that our kids, a worldview our kids may be bringing in, and they may hear what we're teaching from scripture filtered through that cultural worldview.
Jeremy, I think that is great.
So good, Jeremy.
Just to have, if not in the back of our mind, just honestly an answer ready to have if a kid or a preschooler asks those questions. So thank you so much for jumping into that. Well, hi-fi users, leaders, we are so excited for you to be jumping into this new truth, this idea that God made me special, that I am uniquely designed. So whether you are jumping in with the intro videos of the Remarkably Made Art Gallery, or you're hanging out with the super crew in Bark in the clubhouse, we hope that your preschoolers and kids really understand that they were made on purpose. Now, a few quick announcements that we want to make to be sure that you are all aware of is that the Summer Serve Together family event is now available online, so you will not want to miss checking that out. That is an amazing opportunity for you to put together an event, have everything that you need to be able to serve together with not only the kids in your ministry, but the families, and help build real connection and true belonging through those type of events. So we wanted to be sure to give you everything you need for that. So that is all available online. And one other thing to keep in mind this month is that it is a 5-week month. So at the end of this month, we will have a 5th session of Hooray Day and Game Changer. You will not want to miss those. We are so excited to be jumping in with that. So until next time, we can't wait to talk to you more. We can't wait to hear those amazing stories of how God is using you, God is working through your kids, and how God is teaching these preschoolers and kids that they are uniquely designed. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.